In a previous video, we continued our exploration of using CSS keyframes, and we were talking about the from to approach for changing property values. Now, what I've done this time is I've commented out the from to approach, and we're going to now look at using the percentage approach, which you can use as many of these keyframes, if you will, as you like. So when I say a keyframe here, I'm going to refer as 0, 24%, 48%, 72, and 100% as my key frames, my key properties. Okay, and then CSS will do the tweens for you. All right. So how did I come up with this? Well, there's lots of different ways you can approach this, but let's just take a look at something I've set up here in Illustrator. So what you could do is you can use a program like Illustrator, or pretty much any program you want for this part of the demo, and you could even use graph paper or create your own graph. So the idea here is, as I mentioned, I brought up in the previous video, what if we wanted our astronaut to go on a path that was more, let's say, like a figure eight, okay, or a circular pattern, or whatever sort of curvilinear pattern. So I've placed an 8 in the background, and I'm just using this as a guide or a template. And you'll notice that there's also the graph has been brought up, so we can see our graph in the background. And I've tried to lay out the initial keyframes, and the initial keyframes are going to be the magenta keyframes here. They look kind of red, and I'm trying to establish a start point, then my 25, 50%, 70%, and then 100%. Okay, so this keyframe will be both 0% and 100%. So then 25, 50, and 75. Okay, and what you're then going to need to do is figure out what is the top, in our case the top and the left value. And I believe for us we were working with 10 rem and -3 rem. So this would be our 0 and our 100. And then on the graph paper, you're just going to have to figure out where what the next values will be. And you can just write them down or type them out or whatever. So this is what I've come up with. All right. And I went ahead and, for whatever reason here, I think I broke it. I think it's because of the steps we've had. I broke it down a little differently than 25, 50, and 75. Okay, so I just did that based on the spacing. So you're going to have to kind of fuss with this a little bit. But this is what I've figured out here roughly. Okay, so let's go to our code. Get back there. And I've entered these keyframes in. Okay, so we're switching from to to. Now we're using percentages to equal our particular keyframes. And then I've gone ahead and commented out. So let's just move this a little bit. I commented out this property and value. Okay, this declaration. And I've added a second animation. And again, we're targeting astronaut. This time I'm going to change this to 4 seconds. And I'm going to set normal for my path. All right. And then linear for the keyframe, how we're dealing with the keyframes. And then this will be on an infinite loop. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we have. So I'll update the page, and you'll see that our astronaut, if you watch really closely, you'll see your astronaut making this diamond shape. Okay, so we're not really getting perfect curves. This is still sort of a rectilinear path. So to get more of a curved path, you would need more points, okay, more keyframes or steps. So if we go back to Illustrator, and we now place, I'll just use the pink here, as more keyframes, more stationary points, if you will, that you will have to find coordinates. And I've done that, and here is the example. Now I've stepped in the new coordinates, 12, 36, 60, and 85%. All right, so we have more steps, more keyframes, more moments in time, if you will, which we're capturing information, and we're allowing the CSS to tween the in-between steps, like between 0 and 12. Now, the idea is in animation, the more points we create, and the closer those points are, then the likelihood of creating a smooth path will increase. And the amount of work you have to do to figure this out will increase. Okay, so let's just say that we now, let's go back and go to our code, and what we're going to do now is update our list here. Okay, so I already have the steps. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause for just a moment just to save us a moment of time. While we paused, I went ahead and commented out the keyframes, which we previously were using, and now I've added those additional steps, those additional keyframes, and I've stepped them in so you can see the additional frames. Okay, so we had to use our little Illustrator illustration with our graph and just had to go in and figure out the top and the right for each of those positions. Okay, everything else has stayed the same. We have just increased the amount of steps and the relative proximity of those steps to create what would be closer to a curve. So let's go ahead and save and take a look at what these additional steps. So I'm going to leave this, you just watch the astronaut do his little diamond shape here. And now let's go ahead and update the page. And let's take a look. Okay. And you're going to get a bit more of a curve, but is it worth all the extra work? Well, if you're really into animation and you want something to be a certain way, then you're going to have to invest the time and figure it out. I'm not saying anything new to any of you who are already working with animation or keyframe-based animation. You already know it's a lot of work. And it's the same here. The more effort, the more time, the more planning you put into your animation, the better the end effect. Okay, so using Illustrator and plotting out those keyframes and those coordinates, well, that's one approach. And if we go back and we look at our Illustrator file, let me just zoom out here a little bit, you'll see that it's a lot of work. It takes time. It's just what it is. But you might be noticing these other shapes I have here. Well, there's something really cool we can do with Illustrator and SVG, scalable vector graphics, that might make your life a little bit easier and your animations just that much better. We'll explore using SVG for our animations in the next video.